Learning how to draw caterpillars is such a fun drawing exercise because of how abstract looking caterpillars are. And because they fall into the realm of insects, they are very visually versatile creatures that can be integrated into many different artworks. But their bizarre visual quality also gives us the opportunity to explore various color variations, various shading techniques and drawing styles, and ultimately it's just a great drawing exercise. With that being said, hey guys, my name is Matt. Welcome to another video by artincontext.org, where we explore various art related topics, and in today's tutorial we will be looking at how to draw a caterpillar. More specifically, we will be looking at how to draw the black swallowtail caterpillar, and we will be doing this through the use of some specific mediums such as graphite pencil, colored pencils, and some ballpoint pens. So with that being said, let's get into it. Now we're going to start off by sketching the caterpillar. So we start by drawing a curved line on our page with an HB pencil to determine the length and the scale of our caterpillar drawing. Now we want to give our line kind of like a wave-like motion with two arches in it which will guide the flow of the caterpillar drawing. So we want to start from the anal prolegs of the caterpillar, whereby we slowly work our way through each segment of the abdomen until we reach the head. Now from the back of the caterpillar, the segments will start out quite small in scale and slowly get larger as they move through the abdomen area of the caterpillar. A really good suggestion is to look at a diagrammatical reference image of the black swallowtail caterpillar. This way you can also understand the various terms and kind of help us identify the various features as we continue through this drawing process. So as you go through the abdomen of the caterpillar, you want to also steadily draw in each segment. Each of the segments is also similar in size and shape, so this can also be considered as a rectangular shape or an oval shape stacked together or stacked to one another, next to one another, and that's kind of forming the larger and the main section of the caterpillar's body. We want to continue adding these shapes together one after the other as we follow the flow of the line. So again, that line will be indicative of the actual flow of our caterpillar structure and how we establish these various segments. Now as we continue, we want to also add in the legs of the caterpillar, which are basically these half moon shapes that fall underneath the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th segments within the abdomen. So all the way from the 4th to the 8th segments in the abdomen is where we basically establish these little leg structures. As we start to come to the thorax area, we will continue with adding in these shapes. However, they will now be slightly raised and form a more triangular shape. The legs that attach to the thorax area of the caterpillar are called true legs and move out laterally in a horn-like shape. So we have these more like moon-like shapes that are established and kind of dispersed throughout the 4th or between the 4th and the 8th segment, but then we have these true leg shapes that are kind of connected near the thorax area. Now the thorax area will have two of these triangular segments that form an arc shape from the abdomen to the head area, and there will be two lateral legs that stick out from each segment of that thorax area. As we come to draw the head, we will draw a third segment that is part of the head area and is slightly smaller than the last two segments in the thorax. The head will poke out slightly like a half moon shape, once again as if it were curled up in the last segment and you could only slightly see it. So you do want to think about these various features. Although they're quite homogeneous, this is why looking at a reference or diagrammatical drawing of a caterpillar is really helpful throughout the drawing process and defining these various features. Now we're going to move on to adding black swallowtail patterns to our caterpillar sketch, which are very specific and iconic to the black swallowtail butterfly. So naturally we will now proceed to add some stripes and shapes into the different segments of the caterpillar drawing, which establish the unique and the iconic features of the black swallowtail caterpillar. So beginning from the head, we want to add blob-like shapes to different sections of the caterpillar. These shapes will be quite smaller in each segment throughout the entire caterpillar. There will generally be scattered blobs within each segment, where we will have two large ones and one or two little blobs in between. So looking at black swallowtail caterpillars and visual references on the internet are really going to assist you in this particular part of the drawing process. Again, we want to add these shapes and patterns in each segment of the caterpillar from the head to the anal prolegs. So we also want to make sure that we take our time adding these patterns to the caterpillar so that they flow and form within each segment segment as naturally as possible, and keeping it throughout the entire structure is also maintaining that consistent visual quality and pattern that runs throughout the entire black swallowtail caterpillar. Now we're going to move on to actually adding in some color to our caterpillar, and we just want to be very cautious, again making sure that we are being very considerate of the actual color variation of the black swallowtail caterpillar. So we are going to start with lighter colors and then slowly darken our caterpillar drawing as we proceed with this drawing process. So let us take a yellow pencil for now and proceed to add yellow to the bottom of each segment within our caterpillar. We want to add yellow along the bottom of the caterpillar so that when we add in various greens, we can blend it over the yellow. So we're trying to create these subtle gradients to kind of define qualities of lighter and darker areas in the coloration of our caterpillar. We can also lightly add in some blue near the bottom areas, which will give the caterpillar slight transparency near the bottom of its abdomen area, and this is just a very unique kind of quality and a unique kind of way to define that transparentness near the abdomen area. So using a light green pencil for now, we can start to work our way through each segment and shade green along the top areas. Now the intention is to kind of work in this green color from the top down. So in each segment within the caterpillar, we want to work some green coloration, moving through each segment from the top of the segment to the bottom of the segment. So you want to make sure you take your time slowly blending the green into the yellow within each of the segments of the caterpillar. You want to go from the top of each segment and slowly shade downward, allowing the green to blend into the yellow. And this is why pencil or colored pencils are really worth considering in terms of creating a color drawing, because they have a really good ability to create these blends, especially when the coloration of an insect or a specific object is very unique in the sense that it has these subtle gradients between colors. We now want to work with the darker green pencil and again go from the top of each segment and blend it into the lighter colors. So the coloring process is quite additive and it's more like a layering process, which means we add in the light colors first and build up those tonal values as we kind of establish them in each segment throughout the entire caterpillar, and then going over them with a darker color and proceeding to shade over those lighter colors to create those seamless gradients. So slowly work on each segment as you go through the whole body of the caterpillar. Use the darker green to add in some creases and shading around the leg areas, as well as to create some under layers of shading. Now we're going to move on to adding shading and color to the caterpillar's patterns. So starting from the head area, we want to work our way through the caterpillar, slowly adding black to the patterns in each segment. We want to use our marker or brush pen to do so. With the black swallowtail caterpillar, we will find that these blob features are very distinct in terms of their coloration, and they are a very vivid black, and then there'll be these moments of orange and yellow little blobs in those black larger patterns. So using something like a marker or a pen is a great way to kind of darken those sections, but then strategically working around those little colored features. So the idea is that as we add black to the patterns in each segment of the caterpillar, we also want to work with our pens to add some shading simultaneously. So go through each segment one at a time as we add black to the patterns, with little blobs of orange as well, and some shading to give the caterpillar more dimension. So you do want to make sure you go through each segment with attention to detail. The orange blobs can be placed quite sporadically in each segment, so you don't necessarily need to worry about keeping this placement very consistent of those little orange blobs. They can be quite sporadic and random. However, because we are simultaneously working with our pens to add in some shading, we want to add some shadow along each divisional line between each segment. So the idea is that when we add these subtle gradients with our pens between the various segments, we are creating these shadow transitions that seem darker, where the segments would curl in on one another and basically kind of conglomerate or overlap one another. where light would struggle to penetrate that kind of surface area, and then naturally it will become lighter as we move into the larger surface area, the more exposed surface area of each segment. So as we add shading to the caterpillar, we want to use our pen to also outline the different segments. We can also use our ballpoint pens to add some line work to establish some character lines to suggest movement and creases. So we can also play around with adding little stippling marks, some little lines, and this is just a good way to give the actual caterpillar some textural qualities and some movement. We also want to go through each segment slowly, making sure we add shadowing with our ballpoint pens and blackening those blobs with those orange detailings as carefully as possible within each segment. When adding black to the different patterns within each segment of the caterpillar, make sure that you make them imperfect. The patterns look similar but are all subtly different within the various segments of the black swallowtail caterpillar. So the idea is you can play around with reshaping the actual outline of those various patterns that are black. So you can carry on with this process, slowly working your way through each segment of the caterpillar. Remember, the orange coloration can be drawn as random blobs within each segment, so just bear that in mind as you kind of work your way through the entire caterpillar. Make sure that as you come to the segments with the legs, you shade in the overlapping sections where the legs poke out like little half moon shapes. Some of the segments layer over the legs, and we want to define this quality with our shading process. We also want to make sure that as we add black strips that fall in the connecting areas between each segment, or we darken those lines that kind of divide the segments, that this is very distinct and that we are creating these subtle gradients. Again, that's going to really establish that realistic three-dimensional quality within the segment, and ultimately giving our drawing a less flat look and a more three-dimensional realistic shape in its structure. As we continue with this process of shading and adding color to the segments of our caterpillar, make sure you take a break as well. Remember, when we are drawing something complex and we are working with these various mediums and integrating these different details, it can get quite strenuous. So taking a break is just really important for the drawing process. It keeps you refreshed and allows you to come back with a little bit more of a kind of engaged process. Now, as we continue, remember the pattern shape is more spearheaded in terms of its actual holistic shape on the backside of the caterpillar near the anus. So we also want to make sure we add shading along the creases within the overlapping sections at the back of the caterpillar. Remember, these segments and especially how the caterpillar moves in this kind of weird peristalsis-like way, this wave-like way, it kind of group segments together and they squish together and it creates all these various creases, and then it slowly unfolds and stretches out near the areas where it elongates itself. So thinking about the movement of the caterpillar is also going to help you and assist you in understanding how to shade various parts of the caterpillar. Once we have completed the shading and the coloring process, we want to take our ballpoint pens and give the legs little hairs. Now, by doing this, we give the caterpillar a little bit more of a realistic aesthetic. But as you kind of work with this coloring and shading process, remember to work your way from one side of the caterpillar all the way to the back end. And this way you spend time on each segment, making sure that you add in color, blending in those colors, ultimately adding in shading, and then defining the very unique patterns, that black quality, those little blobs of orange, and making sure you work slowly and being patient. The more time you take, the more realistic, obviously, your caterpillar drawing will look. And this is why we also want to be conscious of little details that can enhance our drawing by little shading moments or movements within the surface area of various segments, adding in little hairs to the legs to give these more subtle features some attention, and that way they obviously become a little bit more distinct, which is a great addition. You know, it enhances the drawing holistically. But once we have done that, we're going to move on to contextualizing the caterpillar drawing by placing it on a branch. Now, we want to give the caterpillar a little bit more context so that it doesn't necessarily exist just within a void, and we can do this by drawing a branch. So using your HB pencil, let us proceed to draw a branch shape that falls underneath the caterpillar. We want to take our HB pencils and add some light shading to the branch. Make sure the shading is quite scattered to give the impression of wood or the the textural quality of wood. Now using a light green pencil, again, you can also play around with adding these lighter colors and building them up with darker color variations, ultimately enhancing the tonal variation. We want to establish light coloration within the branch with the light green first, and then we can go over it with some darker colored pencils. So using a dark green pencil, you can go over the pencil shading marks to give them a little bit more coloration and definition, and then from there you can take a brown pencil and proceed to lightly go over the pencil marks again to give the branch a little bit more contrast. Again, with a woody texture, it's quite abstract, so you can be quite strategic in leaving out these little negative spaces to create this quality of highlight, and then ultimately working in these scattered shading marks, these zigzaggedy kind of scattered shading marks to give the impression of woody textures. And then lastly, using your ballpoint pen, you can add in some light line work to give the branch a little bit more of a distinct aesthetic. You can outline the branch and add some light shading to the branch, which will obviously give it more contrast and ultimately enhance its three-dimensional qualities. But otherwise, guys, that is it. This is how to draw a caterpillar. And also just how to contextualize a caterpillar on a actual surface like a branch. Some key things to think about: caterpillars are actually very simple, however they do have these little nuanced, smaller, subtle details that we do want to pay attention to, like little hairs on the legs, little shading variations between various segments to define the three-dimensional qualities within the segments, and ultimately just paying attention to the concept of light and shadow and how to utilize that in your drawing to give your caterpillar a more three-dimensional quality is really essential. And then the other thing is thinking about the coloration, the unique coloration of whichever caterpillar species you are drawing, and how to work with the mediums that you have chosen, in this case colored pencils, to create those transitions and those blends of various colors to capture that unique coloration of that caterpillar. But otherwise, guys, make sure to capture the caterpillar sketch first in pencil, then maybe consider using a reference image to build up the actual structure, then integrate some color, and then ultimately work in some darker details where you can consider darker medium like ballpoint pen or darker pencils and markers and so on. If you did like this video, please let us know in the comment section below. If you are interested in related topics or similar type of drawing ideas, whether it's insects or birds or animals, we really love to make these videos, so please let us know in the comment section below. If you did like this video as well, please do like the video, please subscribe. That helps us to grow the channel, which ultimately enables us to make more art related content for you guys, which we love to do. But otherwise, thanks again. That is it from me today. Until next time, cheers.